the closest I can come to, at least, that resonates for me, and I'll try to articulate this in some way that makes sense. I think of our existence in a similar way as I think of music and rhythm. And rhythm begets rhythm begets rhythm, and one rhythm will spin off into another rhythm. And if you've ever been to like a drumming circle or something, and you hear the drums speaking to one another, and they somehow create a rhythmic conversation. And I think there's, and if you're in a certain rhythm, you can try to get out of that rhythm, and maybe you can, but it's hard. And there'll be that tension and that conflict and that contradiction. But yeah, that's not super profound, but rhythm and music is the closest I come to understanding how.
Well, what I think is interesting about the music analogy is that it kind of dabbles in both sides. There is a openness and freeness and randomness to it, but there is also some order and structure, but not like you would think of in a very rigid way, right? Much like you think of jazz or whatever. That's what I think of when you say it. It's free flowing, but there's still some order to it. There's still something guiding it, some thread throughout it that keeps it together. And in some ways, I think that is profound.
Nice. Well, you just articulated it way better than I did. So thank you for that. Thank you. Yeah, totally. It is a team effort. See, this is illustrating exactly what I'm talking about. Had I not, that's you captured exactly what I've been feeling in words that I might not have had.
Do you think we as humans, as a human species, do we ever get to a place where, let's assume that's true, right? We don't know, but let's assume that is true. There is some musical rhythm to it, where we all kind of get that, where we get to more of an enlightened state at scale. Maybe some of the conflicts, the pain, the suffering, the pettiness that we deal with now, we can rise above that and kind of have an understanding of that. I know there'll always be some suffering, but do you have optimism that we can get there, or back to where you were before? Do you think it's more kind of cyclical, where we have some good periods and bad periods and it just flows like that?
Well, my best sort of guess is sort of somewhere between optimism and cynicism, where on the one hand, if you look at, say, history as a circle, an unending circle, as some philosophers have, then it just repeats over and over again. And that's pretty depressing to me. I like to think of it more as a spiral, that it's a circle, but it's a circle that repeats sort of infinitely and in different ways. I like the idea. I don't know if I always believe it, but I love the idea that we are becoming, let's say, more and more, quote unquote, enlightened as we go along. And there may be areas in which that's true, and other areas where that's not true. I hope that it's true. I really do. I hope we strive to be better than the generation before, and that each generation becomes more compassionate and loving. Of course, that'll depend, not just on our own human hearts, but on conditions as they face us in the future. If conditions become, whenever conditions are dire, the human heart has a harder time opening to the other, and being not so self-centered. So, I would say, while things are still pretty good, for as long as they're pretty good, whether in history or in our own personal lives, we need to practice compassion to whatever degree we can and make it part of our habits.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a phrase I say to my son often, which ties to what you're saying, which is a stupid phrase, but I often say to him, it's easy when it's easy, it's hard when it's hard. And I think it gets right to the core of what you're saying, which is when conditions are tough, it's very hard for us to be good people. Or the way I say it to him is like, being nice to your mom, doing the right thing. When everything's going great, when it's summer vacation and you're in the pool all day and then you have to go clean your room, it's like, yeah, of course, yeah, I'll go clean it. But when it's, homework and stress and other things going on, that's that much harder. And in some ways, that's my hope. My hope is for the cynical side is that we can never get there, but the hope is that we as people can evolve, maybe literally, but maybe metaphorically, evolve to a place where we can do the hard things when it's hard. Because I think that's what would keep us in that circle. Because times are going to be hard. There's always going to be things that are beyond our control as humans that become hard. It's our ability to step outside of that and say, okay, that is hard, but I could still do that thing. I could not just make it about me and my gut visceral reaction to say, well, lock it down, protect myself. But I wonder at a very biological level if that's possible. My cynical side says no, but
Yeah.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. I think conflict, to agree, is in some ways necessary, in the sense of it is what, through conflict, we build to higher forms of understanding and consciousness. Now, of course, it's easy to say conflict with a lowercase c, and then there's conflict with an uppercase c, where when really truly horrendous things happen, it's very hard to justify that that's leading to a better end. But I think that is where it comes in of, to whatever degree we can strive to make something good and future positive out of something horrendous. That's where we do our job as humans, trying to create a better world.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place to end it with one last question, because I think what if you pull the blinders back to a point and you recognize that there is almost like a coldness to the world in much of what you're saying, where horrible things that happen have to happen for us to be better. And that's, there's been a thread of this throughout the conversation, but are you okay with that? If that's true, if the thing that comes to mind, which is the safest way to say it, is, I don't know if you're familiar with like the Marvel movies and comics and all that, but like Thanos, right? Thanos' whole thing was he wanted to kill half the population because he thought that would put us on a better place, a better scale. A much darker, more depressing way to go is Hitler and the Holocaust. It's hard to ever feel like, yeah, there was some good that came out of the Holocaust. But what if that's true? And again, I say that with full sensitivity. Obviously, the Holocaust was horrible, but what if on a very grand level, events like that push us to a better place as humans? Are we okay? Like, are we ever okay with that? I know mathematically it checks out, maybe, if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, but on a very personal, emotional level, it feels like, I don't care if the math checks out, like that's wrong.
Yeah.
How would you view that? Would you be okay with that if that's where the
Oh, I
blinders?
mean, something to the Holocaust, or even something small like a school shooting. I can't. How do you do the math in any way that it balances out as a human being? I don't think I can answer, especially with specifics like that, because it is so horrible that I can't even go there. But I will just say, I believe in human beings. Horrible things happen. There are some really horrible people out there, but there are some, I've traveled around the world. I've talked to people. The majority of people out there are kind, good, interesting, full of wisdom, even if they don't know it. We are capable of extraordinary things.